27th Leadership Lecture on Cybersecurity and the Emerging World Order. And we have Sridhar Sidhu to take us through this wonderful and very emerging and continuously emerging topic. And before I hand over the platform to him, let me have the pleasure of introducing him. I'm sure those of you have visited his LinkedIn page and other work that he has done. He has done phenomenal work in this area, especially I would say to do with the greenfield projects. He started his career as an associate vice president and project manager at ING, where he worked for about 3 years and 5 months. And then he was with Sachin Computer Service Limited, and where he was taking care of, as a program manager with Royal Bank for about 4 months. After that, he was with Deloitte and Touch for 8 years and 5 months. Again, he was associated with risk advisory professionals advising clients to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of their finance organization. And like I said, he was there with them for 8 years. And since then, that's since April 2014, or precisely, that time, he has been with Wells Fargo and various capacities, and the latest one being a senior vice president and head of information security services group. And like I said, in his illustrious career, he has been a risk management professional with 20 years of plus years of experience across industry and consulting organization. And he's currently working at Wells Fargo, like I said, with dual reporting to global CISO and the global chief compliance officer. And you can imagine the kind of, the mandate that he must be running along with his team. And earlier, like I said, he worked with Deloitte, in various risk consulting groups, including financial reporting, risk advisory, corporate governance, finance transformation advisory, etc. He also worked, like I said, as regional lead of finance transformation practice at Deloitte prior to joining Wells Fargo. And today, like I said, I've written the chat box. He's going to take us through 4 important dimensions. Again, when I say important, very limited, but then this is from the point of view of not of more of as somebody as a user perspective. And again, when I say user, either it can be individual or consumer level, also at your respective firm level. So therefore, there is a lot more that we can learn and get benefited immensely out of it. And look forward to your session, Sridhar. Over to you, Sridhar.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you very much for the kind and long introduction. So this is the first late evening session in my life. So it's very interesting to see how this conversation would go forward. That said, first of all, for those of you who have taken time on a Saturday evening to spend time with me, I deeply appreciate your personal time. And like any other leadership level lectures, the purpose of this probably next 45 minutes conversation is not to impart any of you with any technology-centric executable knowledge. It's to trigger some thoughts across the spectrum of topics that we have put in place as agenda items. And second, the audience will come from different backgrounds, right? Somebody who's in MBA doing MBA on business, somebody who's in the doing masters in technology or security, somebody may be doing even marketing, right? So what I'm going to do for the next 40 minutes is to give you non-technology lingo based, insights into where the world of cybersecurity is and how the India is looking at. So let me start by sharing my screen so that we can get started with it. All right. Let me know if any of you can see my screen so that we can get started.
Yeah, we can see it, Sridhar.
All right. Okay. All right. So as you would see here, the topic is the agility for security, cybersecurity, and the emerging world order. We will cover various topics, but I just wanted to make sure that while I work for a global financial institution in cybersecurity, the views that I'm expressing today on this presentation is, basically are strictly personal views, nothing attributable to either my current employer or my former employers. Of course, the experience working in those organizations have helped me build definitely the content for consumption for each one of you. All right. So I just want to make sure that it is not attributable to any of them. These are my personal views. So glimpse, what we are going to do for the next 40 minutes is this, right? Summary. What's the current state of cybersecurity in India? And I'm not going to bore you with the statistics, the data, the breaches, and what have you, but trigger some thoughts around how to look at cybersecurity. The second one we would cover is if you were to look back, in history, not necessarily 20 years ago, but recent history, how the criminal activity has changed over the last 10, 15-year time horizon, and what the technology organization, security organizations need to do about it. And once we look at that criminal activity, what are the major cybersecurity concerns that we would briefly touch upon? And then while looking at those concerns, what are the emerging threats within those concerns is something we would cover, because this will be the trend for the next maybe at least 5 to 6 years. These emerging trends will continue. With all the insights of what the concerns are, what the emerging landscape is, we will build a case for how to safeguard whether individuals or organizations or the countries or the global economic activity as such, right? Then we would briefly touch upon the Digital Personal Data Protection Act, which was enacted last quarter. This has been in the works for quite some time, and finally we got the act. There are more activities to be done, but we will macro level look at what this activity entails. Then we would talk about the proposed Digital India Act 2023, which is supposed to replace the IT Act, which is currently in force. We'll briefly touch upon that. And we will touch upon what are the key themes that would be emerging for, if you were to look back from 2030, what would be these cybersecurity themes like, right? Kind of crystal gauging, but some of these things are instantly my ideas, but instead of me saying it, I've also tried to put some research material as well. After that, we will cover one. So I'll leave you all with one parting thought, and then we will end up actually having Q&A. So that's what we will do. And one more initial information, whatever materials here, these are all public sourced or maybe prepared by bits and pieces prepared by team, for our own internal consumption, but nothing, specific to the organizations as such. So with that, what we're going to cover, let's get started with, so look at this picture, right? I would want you to look at this picture, and I don't know whether each of you can chat something on the chat box to see what is the, what comes to your mind at the first. Let me take let me pause for about a minute or a minute and a half. Let's see what you see as initial thoughts when you see that picture. Professor or anybody from TimesPro group will we be able to see any input from the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I can see, but the only thing is, I'm not. I mean, not any. Anybody has put it as of now.
Okay. All right. So then, in that case, we will continue with we'll continue with the conversation, right? So look at this. This really reflects the state of cybersecurity in India, right? For that matter, most of the emerging countries, we all can relate to this picture for the simple reason is that forget about probably all the metros where this may not necessarily be happening, but if you look at the tier 2, tier 3, or even small towns and villages, this is what happens. We end up raising our kids in a healthy environment. We wake them up in the morning. We give them a good shower. We will give them a great breakfast, which potentially is nutritious. And then we put them into auto rickshaws like this. where people from different backgrounds, different habits, different health situations, they all get into one auto rickshaw to go to the school, right? So it's nothing different when it comes to even corporate information security. It's the same, but things have changed. For example, if you look at the good old days where data center driven, everything is within your network. Very rarely you have interactions, live connections happening from outside. If you are a mid organization, not necessarily global organizations. That kind of looking at your own organization, your own infrastructure, the security and health of that infrastructure is more than enough to manage your day-to-day operations, which is no longer the case. Because much like what this picture you see, you take care of your baby, but you connect that baby with somebody else. The same thing happens in corporate world as well. So you have your own data centers, you have your own infrastructure, your own applications, but you start interacting with the external world. And sometimes that external world could be a third party sitting in other part of the world connecting to your network. Maybe you have what we call as software as a service providers, right? Or you may be partly on the cloud, right? So you don't have a single view of how things are going on, and that leads to complexity. Complexity leads to fundamentally execution challenges, and the execution challenges will potentially lead to actual cyber events happening. So this particular slide, I can cover every aspect of cybersecurity, whether it is vulnerability management, network security, endpoint security, you name it, cloud, everything that is under the sun for cybersecurity can be covered just with this example. And I don't know who this person took this picture, but I have given that credit to that gentleman. So alame.com. I was looking through and I was blown away how I could use this for simply articulating the importance of cybersecurity. All right. So let's go to the next slide. So we talked about the looking back in history, right? If we were to look back in history and then look at the time horizon of cyber criminal activity globally, right? So you have an x-axis, which talks about time horizon of the criminal activity, the y-axis, which gives you the business or economic impact because of the criminal activity. Now, if you were to look at these two axes and then look back in time, initially, maybe about 15, 20, 25 years ago, there are individual or regional group of cyber criminals, right? Somebody who is interested in walking into a network, or somebody who's deliberately trying to harm somebody. But these are not individual, but a small set of groups. Now, because of their being individual or a small group of criminals, their ability to impact either the businesses or global economic activity is on the lower end, right? Then things have changed. There are organized groups, global in nature, and then there are some rogue nations. If somebody reads probably the news on an ongoing basis, you get to see who those rogue nations are, what they're trying to do. I prefer not to take the names of those rogue nations. Most of them are already in the news. So as they are bringing up, right, so what's happening? Their ability to impact the business or economic activity has significantly gone up. And this is a day-to-day phenomenon these days compared to what it was maybe 15 years ago. Now, the future, if you were to look at, the future would be a cyber war, right? A cyber war against global critical infrastructure. Let me put this. Critical infrastructure, each one of us sitting in our homes, we are able to use wireless networks provided by our fiber optic cable service providers. And we are able to watch, listen, learn, watch even some Netflix, all that is happening. Imagine, that pipe going from one global region to other global region is cut beyond repair. What will happen? The global commerce of maybe half the world's population can potentially stop. It is possible, but of course there are mechanisms to, for resilience and all, but that is possible. And then the second one is the wars are no longer physical wars. They are predominantly mind games and cyber wars. And that's where the world is trending to. And because of that, their ability to impact, I gave an example of maybe, undersea cables, making impact to them, the global economic activity stops. So the impact is significantly higher. So that's where, the trend is going on, right? So if we see from an individual or a, small group of cyber criminals to organized global groups, potentially building the ability to, impact cyber wars. Now, if we look at the x-axis and y-axis, let's look at one more axis on the right side, right? So this is nothing but how you need to approach the cybersecurity in respect of the time horizon as well as business impact, right? So when the world is in the order of maybe individual or regional groups or small, rogue nations, depending on what one country's geopolitical stand is, when some large global geopolitical event happens, some countries are not impacted as big as other countries because there are interested parties on both sides, and sometimes some countries doesn't get impacted. If it is an individual or regional group of cyber criminals, it's okay to look at your own technology and compliance-centric risk management and cybersecurity approach. But when you're an extended global large enterprise, and you have a geopolitical scenario, for example, if you are in some parts of the globe where you're impacted more because of the geopolitical events happening, you just can't look at your infrastructure, your third parties, how you're looking at, right? Because the geopolitics will play a significant role, though you are a business organization or a simple consumer of the business services, but the impact is significantly high because of the geopolitical scenario. So from that standpoint, one is required to look at not just their infrastructure, but even the geopolitical matters. So hope that gives you some context of what's changing and how significantly it is changing when it comes to the cyber criminal activity and the business impacts. So these are obviously the defenders. They've been the same. They're trying their best over the period of time to reduce the business impact, proactively manage criminal activity, at the same time work internally with all the siloed environments to move from compliance-centric cybersecurity to risk-centric cybersecurity. So then, when we look at the major concerns for any organization, for that matter, we look at there are 4 distinct segments of concerns. I'll start with the top left first, right? If you are an industry where you are regulated, whether you are in a bank or an insurance company, a retail company, telecom company, energy company, each of them are regulated by their own regulators. The challenge is that the frequency with which regulations are changing, because the technology is changing, leading to regulators changing more quickly the regulations, the impact for cybersecurity matters are getting significantly higher. The second one is, if you look at the recent history of 4 or 5 years, starting from our GDPR to other countries coming up with their own privacy laws, India has come up with our own DPDP Act, all that. These are more about pro-consumer regulatory pressures. You're doing the same business as an organization 3 years before, but your requirements have changed because the regulations have changed. That leads to additional investment, additional pressures. Sometimes the focus shifts to compliance compared to threats because there's small amount of budget. The budget is, no organization in the world has unlimited budget for cyber. While people would say that we would fund as much as is needed, but the needed is something that we need to be mindful of. Then the second one is, for example, if there are any kind of a PII, personally identifiable information, or the CII, customer identifiable information. If any of these data sets are breached, right, significant brand and reputational damage. There are organizations which have never recovered. There are organizations which took beating on their revenue, the market cap, name it, right? And even when they lost all that, even from an acquisition standpoint, they were valued X. And then security even happened, their valuation significantly gone down, and there were no takers even for acquisition too. Those things have happened. Then the lower left, you see emerging, technologies, be it in, Internet of Things or mobile, whatever you look at, right? We are a world of population of about 8 billion. As of today, we have close to 16 billion, IoT devices connected to the world network. In 2 years from now, it potentially go up to 40 billion plus. So imagine the complexity. Let me give an example. Say, for example, you are, a small manufacturer. Say, for example, you manufacture cardboard box. I'm just giving an example. Now you have your plant, you have your inventory that comes up. Against that inventory, for example, you want to take loan. That happens, which is cash flow loans, all that. Imagine in the warehouse, there is an IoT device which actually tracks the number of cardboard boxes. And on that, the order management system, the bank gives you a cash flow loan. If somebody can tamper with that just one device at the warehouse, you can either bring it up or bring it down. So the bank decisions will go significantly wrong if that happens. Second thing, if you look at the life sciences, for example, if somebody is a diabetic, right, and they have a device which is implanted, which gives you at a certain point in time certain amount of glucose for you, or if you are a heart patient and you have a pacemaker. I hope none of you like that. Maybe there are people who are heart patients with pacemakers in their heart. The purpose of pacemaker is to keep your heart beating at a particular rhythm at any given point in time. Imagine if somebody can actually bring that battery alone of that pacemaker, even at a farther distance. You can literally kill that person. So economic activity can go extremely wrong. The healthcare, I told you about the global wars. You don't need to do any global wars. You can go point at times and then take care of some critical assets for you, right? Then the other one is complex infrastructure. Some of us will have data centers, some of us will have a combination of data centers, cloud, as I said, the third parties, so many complexities. And you will end up integrating, stitching all of them together. And that complexity alone gives additional risk for cybersecurity. Then the fourth one, as you could see here, is the emerging threat landscape. State-sponsored attacks we have seen in multiple news channels. Even as we speak, there are state-sponsored attacks happening. Industrial espionage. If you are a large organization, it's extremely difficult to know that somebody who is on your payroll could also be working for another organization trying to steal information from you. It's extremely difficult. Insider threat, that's what I meant by it. And third-party threats. Then the so-called criminal threat actors. So these are four basic segments of concerns. You can bring everything and anything in terms of cybersecurity concerns into these four groups. At any given point in time, depending on who you are as an organization, the size, the complexity, the region that you operate in, some of them may be higher importance, some of them may be of lower importance. So hope that gives you a brief view of what the major cybersecurity concerns are. So let me go to the emerging threat landscape. In the interest of time, I'll quickly go over. As I said, this slides, all these have got sources. They are mentioned in the slides as well. And again, this is only to trigger some thoughts. You can always go back and explore more to understand a little more on what I'm trying to tell you here. So if you look at this, there are a series of cyber threats that you see here on the left side of the screen. Be it ransomware, we hear a lot here, right? Or somebody who's technically savvy, probably you know what denial of service is. Basically, they choke our network so that we won't be able to provide service to our customers. Insider threats, somebody who's inside but working for somebody else can access systems and then probably do all malicious activities. So there's a series of things you could see. I mean, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because we have limited time here, but each slide you can go for about 4 or 5 hours talking about. So these are the kind of cyber threats, right? So who engage these cyber threats, right? So these are the people. At the bottom, you see somewhere from criminals to hacktivists, to criminal hackers, to competitors, to foreign nations, to disgruntled employees. You might say, what's the difference between a criminal and a criminal hacker? I'm a criminal, but I don't hack. I end up using providers who will provide hacking services for me, whether it is ransomware as a service, whatever you call it, right? Who are the hacktivists? They're basically activists who hack into infrastructure of people that they don't like. For example, if some country says something about another country in a geopolitical scenario, then these activists end up targeting the country's infrastructure which they don't like. It happens even within India context too, with some of our neighbors, right? So the hacktivist job is basically what they do. Basically, is they are generally not in the interest of doing bad things, but they are activists. When they see something that they think it is wrong, they go after the organizations or the countries they feel are doing wrong. So what are they after? They could see their personal data, financial data, state secrets, all that kind of thing, intellectual property, what business plans a company has so that they can share with others, all that kind of stuff. Then why do they do that? Obviously, multiple reasons. Somebody wants money, somebody wants fame, somebody basically wants to protest saying that you are doing something wrong. And I want you to feel because I'm going to come after you and make you feel that you're doing something wrong. Somebody just do that for fun. Somebody feel empowered by, hacking into somebody's infrastructure. Somebody wants fame, somebody wants money, multiple reasons, right? Then how do they do it? Fundamentally, if you look at all the breaches across the world that happened maybe in the last 15 years, the fundamental reason why it happens is unauthorized access. It could be through social engineering. What we mean by social engineering is that these threat actors gather so much information about the individuals. They're able to phish them and get credentials and come into the organization's network using those credentials, and then slowly elevate their credentials so that they have a privileged access, and then do all sorts of things and take the data outside. It's a long-run process, but many a time, 95% of the breaches happen because of social engineering and phishing, right? Vulnerability exploitation. Remember the first slide I had shown you, right? We take good care of our kids, but we end up putting them into auto rickshaws with other people who are not necessarily healthy, right? The point is, fundamentally, cybersecurity, if it is the hygiene is managed, two-factor authentication. That means for you to access a network, you need to have a user ID and a password, and then you have something more to access the network. And unless that something more, whichever way you want to do it, is not inputted to the system, you won't get access. So if you do a two-factor authentication, 90+% of your security, breaches can be addressed. Is it easy? It is. But the point is, easy things are complex to implement, and complex things people go after because of the fame that I have implemented the most critical security, controls for the organization, because that's aha factor for security folks. But the process like identifying where you have vulnerabilities, patching them in time, changing the infrastructure, change management, done well. These are table stakes, but those are extremely, boring, for lack of a better word, for many people. And that's where the problems come. So hope this gives you some understanding of what this emerging threat landscape is looking like, right? So now with all that background, I'm going to tell you why we need to have a case for safeguarding the interests of the organizations and how you do it. So as you could see, Frederick the Great said, he who defends everything defends nothing, right? It's like this. Now, you can sit in home, you can close all the doors, you can close all the windows so that you don't let anybody come in, right? That's what we can do for our own organization too. You can't, if some earthquake happens, some flooding happens, some power issue happens that burns the house, those are the things that are not in the control of the homeowner, right? So the point is that you can only defend certain things, you can't defend everything. So what we can defend is something organization specific. They need to look at it. And once you identify that, you can't have, an attack on all the things. You need to have a risk intelligent view of cybersecurity. What do I mean by that, right? You're not only looking at your core infrastructure, you're also looking at your extended enterprise, where your third parties, where your SaaS service providers, where your network is connecting, which industry that you are in, which industry, if you are in an industry where people willing to target you more, if you're a bank or an insurance company, that's where the money is, that they will come after, right? Are geopolitical reasons. If you are a heavily North American driven organization, the geopolitical scenarios are different compared to you are a fully India-based organization. Your geopolitical scenarios are different. So each organization need to look at what makes sense for them, right? Then coming to probably the India context, regulatory interventions, right? So you need to find out what is the risk-based approach for your organization, and then the regulatory interventions, depending on the industry that you operate in, RBI, Insurance Regulatory Authority of India, and then telecom. All these regulators have their own regulations, which will basically enforce each organization to, have the base minimum expectations from cybersecurity standpoint. The second one, which is also industry agnostic, is the Computer Emergency Response Team India's directions of 22. What it does is they have stipulated certain requirements, and if any of those requirements met, any company that observes this, they are expected to respond to the CERT India within 6 hours of observing those things, which is extremely, extremely well managed, right? They get to see what's happening across the country. Then again, industry agnostic one we talked about is the DPDP Act, the Digital Personal Data Protection Act. And the other one is currently under discussion, which is the proposed Digital Act of 2023, which is going to replace the IT Act of 2000, right? So those are the regulatory interventions. Then the most important one, you look at your own organization, you look at the regulatory matters compared to you, but at the same time, you also need to look at your nation and state level coordination, collaboration. Without law enforcement collaboration, cybersecurity is never complete, because in the worst case scenario, there would be a cyber event. And the first thing they need to reach out to is, in addition to CERT India, the law enforcement, right? Whether you're state police, national, whatever you look at. So that's very, very important. So without these combination of you as an organization looking at yourself, looking at the regulations and managing those requirements, collaborating with your external stakeholders from law enforcement, it will never ever be safeguarding the interest of either your organization or your consumers, right? So that's the landscape we're talking about. So we briefly touched upon earlier, a couple of slides ago, we said from a tech or compliance-based cybersecurity approach to risk-based approach. If you're a tech or compliance-based approach, you will be extremely siloed, you will be technology-driven, not much of broader enterprise-level collaboration happens. But if you go to a risk-based approach, there would be a board level. Now, almost all the companies look at risk-based approach to cyber because of the regulatory matters, because every regulation calls for the board of directors to be responsible. So it's significantly tilting to risk-based approach, but still day-to-day matters are more technology and compliance driven, right? But it really helps in collaboration across organizations. It also helps in, because of the board level oversight, you also get money to implement certain things which otherwise very difficult to get if you're on a tech or compliance based. So this gives you hopefully some amount of understanding of what a tech or compliance-based approach to a risk-based approach. Now we'll quickly jump to the DPDP Act, right? It's been in the making for almost about 5, 6, 7 years, if I recall well. Finally, it came to fruition last quarter. And the purpose of this DPDP Act, again, it's the DPDP Act itself, we can speak for maybe more than 6 to 7 hours. I'm going to give you the broad principles and some of the features of the Act. And this is prepared by one of my colleagues. His name is Santosh. And the previous slide is prepared by one of my DRs, direct reports. His name is Sumit, who is a fantastic cyber threat management guy that we have in the industry. So if you look at this, these are broad principles. It's expected to be lawful and fair, right? What do we mean by lawful and fair? A lot of details are there in the actual Act. And the purpose limitation. What do we mean by purpose limitation? If you as an organization trying to gather information about your prospective client or an existing client or a consumer, the data that you gather is only restricted to the purpose for which you are gathering that information. The service that you will provide for that, you need some information, and that information you're gathering from your potential or existing consumer or client. Once that purpose is met, you as an organization no longer have the right to keep that information, right? That's what we mean by. So data minimization, the data accuracy, data storage limitations, all those things are fundamentally the basic building blocks are the broad principles. If you look at on the right side, you get to see the salient features, right? Maybe the first and second versions are pretty elaborate and called for probably a lot of feedback and some amount of resistance from the industry, but this bill, which is very evolving by its nature, right, is a very good starting point, and a lot of subsequent implementation of the rules, definition of the rules, how those rules need to be implemented, all that will happen, but it is a fantastic structure per se, right? Bill is limited only to digital personal data. What do we mean by digital personal data? If you gather information about an individual in a digital form, right? Somebody goes online, provides inputs, that's called one form of digital personal data. The other thing is that you gather as an organization information on a piece of paper, but what you do, you take that information and put it in a system. That also is called digital personal data. So if you keep the information, everything on a piece of paper, you don't digitize it, you keep that information to provide services, absolutely no problem. DPDP Act will not have any oversight on that. It's perfectly for digital personal data. And fundamentally, data classification is a big issue. So there's no data classification of personal data at this point in time. All personal data to be treated the same. For example, your birth date to your phone number, to your residence, to the IP address through which you connect to the network. Whatever is attributable to you as personal data is considered same, right? It's not that sensitive information or other categories that's not there yet. Then there are certain requirements. You can't meet all the requirements at the same time. So different dates potentially, still in the works though, provided for compliance purposes. The other important factor when you're gathering any information from your customers is the consent, right? The consent has to be clear. A lot of information is there on the consent management in the Act itself. Without taking explicit consent from a customer, you can't gather information, and forget about storing. You can't gather information in the first place. Deemed consent classification, we'll probably skip that because it will take a lot of time to cover that. The other one is that you gather data and then you digitize it. but you're sharing information with people across the world, right? And the same thing is for people who are from the other part of the world here. Remember, one thing I forgot to mention is whichever data you collect, it's only the act is applicable for Indian citizens here in India. Okay, so that's the fundamental difference. The second thing is that whatever you gather information, you can store anywhere. I mean, there is no such, at least clarity is that you can store wherever you want because of your technology operating model, how you want to do it. But when the regulator asks for data sets, you should be able to provide immediately the data that they want, right? Then there is also an expectation that if you have, if you are a, we'll get to the next slide, if you're a significant fiduciary, what a fiduciary is, what a significant fiduciary is, definitions are there, right? You are expected to appoint a DPO, right? And then there are certain requirements. If the data is breached, there are certain requirements to report out. All these are features, but the rules to enable these features for compliance are still in the works. There is a board that will be put up in place. The board will start drafting all the rules so that the organizations can build real demonstrable control solutions for compliance. The first time the quantum of penalties for Indian Act is significantly high is for the DPDP Act for obvious reasons, right? It's the world is completely getting digitized, and it is important to have the penalties which will hinder potentially any kind of negligence, right? So that's why it is anywhere between $6 million to $30 million. So that's in principle the summary of the DPDP Act. As I said, you can probably look at the previous slide here. There is a link given here. You can go to meity.gov.in. You will have the entire act available for you to probably take a look at it. So I think I've given probably much of the details on the previous slide. For example, the notice, the consent, and then the breach notifications and the penalties and all that, right? So let's look at what the data fiduciary is and data principal is, right? So if you look at significant data fiduciary is the definition of what a significant data fiduciary is, that is still to come. But if at all your organization is one of them, you need to have a data protection officer. Then you have to have independent data auditors that they need to do an audit at a certain frequency, and also required to perform the impact assessment because of the Data Protection Act, right? So I know I'm going through a little fast because we started about 7 minutes late and a lot to cover, but also we need to have a few minutes for Q&A, right? So the next one is the Digital India Act. If you look at, I put a similar construct like the previous slide. So what are the objectives of this act, right? The fundamental objective of this act is to have an open internet, which is safe, which is trusted, and which is accountable. Currently, that is not the case, right? The details, you can see the source I've given there. What are the concerns of the government of India to make sure that it is open and safe, right? When we say open internet, people should have a choice as to how they want to use it. Today, it's not there. There are only few large tech companies who have got the monopoly on the choice of the internet, right? It should enable the competition. It should have diversity and fair market access. There are certain organizations, tech organizations, the probability of fair market access because of the thing they do, there is no fair market access. There are no, without taking the names of the organization, that's how it is. And because of their monopoly, the ease of doing business on the internet for certain companies is extremely difficult. So it should give fair access to doing business. The second thing is the act is supposed to enable and accelerate growth because of the digital economy that's happening. And again, you look at on the left-hand side in the red color I've given, this act is supposed to be evolving in nature and consistent with the market trends. And the second one is it will adopt, interestingly, both the principle-based approach and the rule-based approach. So what the principle-based approach and rule-based approach, you can probably Google and find yourself, but it is an interesting combination. Then the other one is expectations is the digitalization of the government itself, right? That's one of the primary objectives for the Digital India Act. And then the other ones you see at the bottom is the protecting citizens' rights, addressing emerging risks like the AI and ML, and future-proof and future-ready for all the digital commerce that we need to do. So you see on the right-hand side, we have salient features we covered about, right? You should have an adjudicator and appellate mechanisms because the fairness is not there. Today, we don't have that globally as an appellate mechanism. I mean, they're there, but they are there. That's all I would say. Upholding constitutional rights of citizens is very, very important. And the age gating of regulating addictive tech, right? For example, there are games that we don't have to name here. Children, teenagers got completely addicted and then led to suicides, led to accidents and all that. So it's important that we reduce the addictive nature of the technology, and this act gives its teeth to actually address that, right? So those are some of the things. I know many things that we can't cover here, but you can see some of the salient features. And at the end of the day, the most important factor is the secure cyberspace, because the topic is for us cyber. So it's important to highlight that one. All right. So what are the key cybersecurity themes? Many of us probably who read a lot get to see this, right? If you were to look into 2030, right, there will be a progress in cybersecurity. How it will be? It is less about defending your fort. It's more to do with being resilient and the capacity to recover. That's what the focus is going to be. In currently, even some large global organization, that's equal focus. Continue to defend your infrastructure, but at the same time, be able to be resilient and recover. That's what it's going to be. Second one is the trust on online is going to worsen day by day, year by year, right? So in that kind of a context, the security is all about less about protecting the confidentiality of the information, but more about protecting the integrity. When I say integrity, for example, the fake news, right? Fake news is a concocted one, which is nothing but doesn't have an integrity with any underlying source. So the more is about protecting the integrity so that the world economic order, world political order, remains intact with whatever challenges everybody is looking at. The third one is the AI and ML technologies. The more and more AI ML come into place, there is ease of doing business, ease of managing economic activity, whatever even the political activity, even the elections and everything, right? But machine learning models could actually train themselves to, do illicit and devious acts. That is absolutely possible, right? So that's what we would see by 2030, predominantly from now through. Not that we only see here in 2030, but we'll be able to see year over year these trends happening. The fourth one is the internet fragmentation. What do we mean by internet fragmentation? Today, every country wants to have digital sovereignty. That means they want to have a control on the internet in their country. And there is no country in the world who doesn't want that digital sovereignty because of their willingness to control the risks, at the same time control the narrative and all that kind of stuff. So internet fragmentation will continue, right? Because of that, what happens is that more powerful cyber attacks will happen. Why? Because the so-called rogue states, which slowly isolate themselves from the main global internet, and then they start actually attacking the sovereign digital infrastructure of countries, right? Because when you're big, you have your own problems. When you're small for your own country, you have benefits, at the same time you have problems too, right? So the powerful cyber attacks today that are not possible for a global internet, when that internet is fragmented, the capacity of cyber criminals to breach into the smaller segments of the internet becomes high and high. because of the digital sovereignty. So hope that gives you some context. The other one is the push and pull between regulatory. The key regulations keep changing. So probably over a period of next 10 to 15 years, the current notion of individual privacy would significantly change. And by 2030, I'm sure the questions around GDPR, the questions around the India Act, or maybe US and all that would change. The sixth one is metaverse. When metaverse came maybe 3-4 years ago, everybody thought this is going to change the world, this and that. I mean, I had my own view. It's dead on arrival, which is still today is the case. By any chance, if metaverse becomes fully realized, then you will have huge privacy and security issues. I don't expect the metaverse to fully realize, but you never know. You can't predict 10 years down the line, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. Then the last one is about sovereignty and shifting power dynamics. What we mean by that? It is also related to the digital, internet fragmentation. So today there is a clear distinction between governments and the large tech companies, but in future, the frontiers would clearly be blurred. There are also notions that the tech companies will also be part of global controlling organizations because of their power, right? That will have a lot of issues on cybersecurity too. So where did I get this? Some of these are my ideas, but incidentally, they are there also in a large, Berkeley University has come up with this in consultation with World Economic Forum, working with many people over the course of last 1 year, right? So the parting thought, I talked about so many things, but I want you to pay attention to the life of a cybersecurity professional, right? All it takes is a single perpetrator amongst the whole host of cyber criminals across the globe to be successful one time to breach an organization. Whereas the people working in that organization need to successfully defend against each of the perpetrating activities and win all the time. The perpetrator we don't even know who the perpetrators are. All it requires is all those, humongous number of people, they need to be successful. One person need to be successful one time. Whereas the people working in the organization need to be successful against each one of them each time. That tells you the complexity of cyber professionals, right? That's why I keep saying that, cybersecurity is extremely demanding, but at the same time, very noble, right? You're literally securing an organization. If you're in a bank, you're securing the hard-earned money of people who trust the bank and put the money in. If you're a mutual fund company, they're putting money in your organization so that you will get them benefits. If you're a healthcare company, they're coming to you with all their diseases and then telling you everything. They're putting everything in their systems. If it is breached, everything will be known to the rest of the world, right? That said, it's next only to serving on the front lines, Army, Navy, Air Force. But cybersecurity is absolutely a noble work to do, extremely demanding. All the time you need to be on your toes, but it is very satisfying work. So with that, I think we will open for questions, maybe 10 minutes.
So let me pick up. In fact, we have 3 questions from Mr. Sudhakar, right? And let me pick up each one of them. His first question is how much trust we should be having on hyperscalers adding more to risk, as they're mostly limited to particular countries in geopolitical scenario. And his second question is to who will all in India DPDP Act is applicable. That's the second one. Third one is how Digital India Act will be implemented. Thank you, Sudhakar. Quite a lot.
Yeah. So let me go with the third one first, right? How the DPDP Act would be implemented is currently it is an act, and there is an expectation that the government will establish a board. That board will have members both from the government as well as industry, and they collectively come up with the rules of the road. And as those rules get published, the real requirements, the finer requirements of the act will be known both to the industry, and the precise rights of individuals is also known by the rules that they will enact. Once that is done, individual citizens will know their rights more finite. And then the organizations will know what exactly the requirements are. And each of those requirements may have a certain time frame for compliance, right? I think there is already expectation that Act is in place, certain things are non-negotiable from day one, right? So, but as the rules come up and the timelines are set up, then industry is expected to be compliant. And that will happen probably, I don't know, I don't want to predict what the government would say, but it will have some time frame, anywhere between few weeks and months to maybe a year, I don't know, but that is going to happen. So once that is done, organizations are expected to look at what those requirements are, whether they are significant fiduciary, then they need to have a data protection officer. Then they also have impact assessment for compliance and build the whole program. If you are not a significant data fiduciary, the requirements could be different. You may not need, technically, you may not need a data protection officer, but the underlying implications would always look for who is the point of person, right? So it's a long journey, but it is a good journey to start so that as the country significantly going into digitalization, this act will only help, safeguard the rights of the citizens of the country. At the same time, uh, prohibit by its law and act, prohibit organizations misusing the data of the citizens of India, right? So I know there are no specific individual requirements right now chatted through rules, so that will come up. So more to come. So I've given that link on the slide, so people can go keep looking at Ministry of Electronics and IT, and then they will provide all the details. The country as a whole is very progressive in providing significantly information, ahead of time, so people can look at it. That's the first part. Let me look at the other one. So, okay. Oh, so sorry, I can't see it here. So tell me the second one, Professor. The question.
The second one is about to who all India, DPDP Act is applicable. That's the second one. And his first one is about
one second, Professor. I couldn't hear. There is some lag somewhere for the second question. Can you please repeat that?
His second question is to whom all India's DPDP Act is applicable.
Yeah, it is applicable for every organization that is registered in India, whether public or private organization, NGO or commercial organization, doesn't matter. As long as the organization has business activities in the country and they gather information either through digital form or in a paper form but digitize them, it is applicable for every organization. Small, big, public, non-public, doesn't matter. That's number one. Number two, it also is applicable for citizens too. For example, there is in the Act, it has got some clauses where as the individual providing information and then false provisioning of information, submission of information can also lead to some fine. It is not just for the organizations, the breach and then 6 million to 30 million fines. There's a fines applicable for individuals too. So as citizens of the country, each one of us need to be mindful of what information where we are giving, how that can be liable for each one of us getting penalized by the board, right? So it is applicable for both the individuals as well as the organizations, small, medium, large, doesn't matter. Okay, the first question, sorry.
Next question. Yeah.
Go ahead.
His first question is how much trust we should have on hyperscalers, adding more to risk as they are mostly limited to particular countries in geopolitical scenario.
Yeah, so that's where the data sovereignty part we are talking about, right? Every country wants to have their own digital sovereignty, which means that they would contain data, data gathering, data storage, data processing, all the whole 9 yards. So it's a fair question, right? In a completely geopolitical scenario, like currently India is going through another geopolitical scenario with another North American country. These are bound to happen, right? So that's where the fragmentation of internet potentially can happen. It has got its own advantages and disadvantages, but it's not a simple question to answer in detail in 2 minutes time. But yeah, depending on which country you operate in. For example, we operate in India, and we have a pretty good relationships with the countries where these hyperscalers are, and the geopolitical relationships are reasonably strong. But you never know how the geopolitical scenarios come up with and what implications you have. We can only keep fingers crossed, but there are the countries that these hyperscalers are. Obviously, they have their own internal, domestic laws and regulations, and bipartisan, treaties are also there. So, is it risky? It is, but is it uncontrollable risk? I don't expect that to be. All right. Okay, I can go to the next question.
Yeah, next question is from Mr. Harinath Yadav. His question is, I would like to request some directions and tips for new aspirants of cybersecurity for starting up a business. Thank you, Harinath.
Oh, somebody who is starting a business, the cybersecurity part of it.
Yeah.
A very, very good question. Let me tell you, as a startup, it's the evaluation is based on the idea and its executability of the idea, and then comes with how much of the data that you have to execute and bring revenue. So particularly for startups, right, the Digital India Act or India Digital Act, or what we call it, right? So it has got some potential, way of looking at the requirements, right? That said, forget about the compliance requirements. If any startup has a breach, their valuation significantly goes down, and it has happened with the Indian startups. Overnight, their valuations have gone down by billions of dollars. So it is important, while the idea is great, the hyperscaling of the idea for providing services to customers is phenomenal. Revenue stream is there, but to protect both the investors in that idea, in that startup, and also protect the credibility and the sustainability of that startup, it is equally important for organizations to have the basics of cybersecurity. And by the way, as I said earlier during the course of the conversation, cybersecurity basic hygiene principles are easy to manage, but people don't necessarily do that, consistently and accurately. But that may not be the case with startups, because they can potentially do most of the things on cloud, public cloud potentially. And the way you take those services for IT infrastructure, applications management, you can also take the services for security as well, but consult somebody who is really good in advising on what services need to buy on the cloud service providers from security standpoint, so that your IP, your business is protected. The probability of breach is remote. You can't say you will not be breached, so that your valuation sustains and you have an exit strategy for that. So hope that answers the question.
Thank you. And we have the last question, Sridhar. This question is from Mr. Kalyan Kaskar. His question is, as of now, does the DPDP Act 2023 replace the section 43 of the IT Act 2000?
I'm sorry, I can't recollect that particular clause of IT Act. So I will have to pass that question. I can probably, if one thing, let that individual reach out to me, or otherwise I will send the response to your team, and you can share with that individual.
Sure, we'll do that. Hope that answers you. We'll get back to you as and when we hear from Sridhar Kalyan. Now, I just have the last question, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
I think one of the things that we get to see is some sort of dichotomy, Sridhar. I think that happened in banking financial crisis, right? I think we talked about it in 2008 and earlier as well. I think that same thing getting repeated in this scenario as well. And that is, the regulatory agencies are supposed to have the best of the minds as far as cybersecurity, regulation is concerned. But then the best of the guys actually are going to the companies, not with the regulatory agencies, right? And then if you, in fact, we have seen in one state, I don't know to name that state, the entire police department of the respective state is going. There's a one go-to man who is just about, he's actually college dropout. He's just about 20 years now as of today. And then entire police force is going to this guy to solve the problem. So how do you expect this one to solve? That's one first part of it. The second part is that a lot of institutions offer this kind of course called ethical hacking, right? So how does that fit into this frame of things in terms of preparing individuals for, any preempting any possible cyber security issues?
Yeah, fair questions both. I will answer the second one first. Generally, the tendency for people, whenever we talk about cybersecurity, comes is the ethical hacking, big bounty hunter, all that kind of stuff, which is only a small part of cybersecurity. Cybersecurity requires process understanding. Some cybersecurity requires technology understanding, governance understanding, data understanding, whole host of things. Generally, people, that's why I said, right? Remember when I said hygiene is easy to do, but difficult to achieve. Similarly, while there are so many other things in cyber, people always want to be ethical hackers because that's where the kick is, like break into the systems and find out, and I've done it. So the point is, people should just not look at that, because even in a large organization, ethical hackers would be no more than probably less than 1% of the headcount, right? 99% of the headcount is different. So people, when somebody is looking for, cybersecurity roles, even somebody who is actually good at operating systems, right? Basic understanding, or somebody who has done the TCP/IP really, really well, they can be a reasonably good network security people. Somebody who has done the fair understanding of operating systems, they can be on the system security side of the house. Somebody who understands databases and data structures, they can be good on securing databases. Somebody who can write a good piece of code, if they are trained, they can be a good application security people. Somebody who understands the process, if you train them for 3 months, they can be a reasonably good third-party speaker. So I hope this kind of information gives people some understanding that cybersecurity is not just about ethical hacking. There are so many other things that people can do. And as I said, the opportunities, the bigger number of positions are outside of ethical hacking. Like that's not, ethical hacking is a very small, tiny portion of the job. And those are very, not everybody gets access to probably network to do ethical hacking, because those people have to be extremely, experienced to actually do that kind of work, right? That's number one, first part of it. What's the first question? Probably, if you, I forgot.
The question was after the talent shortage, kind of, because does the best of the talent go to the companies and not the regular?
So the point is, again, it's an evolving situation. There are states which are very, very good at public-private partnership, right? Some states are not doing it, some states are doing it. For example, take the case. When any crime happens across the world, particularly even in India too, right? There is always an element of cyber, whether it is social media, there's WhatsApp, whether UPI links, probably click that led to money going out. More than 80% of the cases in the country will have one or the other cyber element to it. The point is, from identifying that from a crime to identifying the criminal, and then taking the criminal to the whole legal system for conviction. Unless the conviction rates are higher, there is no deterrent for people not to commit cybercrime, right? How we can do it? Enhancing the cyber technology aspects to police people. Public-private partnership can come a big way, right? There are states which are doing really, really well with the public-private partnership, elevating the cyber forensic capabilities of the law enforcement people, so that every case that they look at, the digital forensics, the documentation, the evidence lifecycle management is so undisputable that conviction rates become higher. So that's where progressive states are doing it. At the end of the day, anybody will start with, when I'm deprived of the basic things, I will take any help that I can get. Maybe whatever the underlying reasons are why people are going to that one individual, I can't comment on it, but if somebody is available and providing services, they're more than happy to take it, right? That's how the world order is. So the progressive states and even the state governments in South India are doing that public-private partnership well. Even the center is planning for that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I think we already shot, 50 minutes past the time. And I really appreciate and thank all you, for joining us in the Saturday evening. And thank, on behalf of all of our participants, thank you so much, Sridhar. It was a pleasure having you. And with such a great canvas, and like you rightly said, it's so much, that we have very little time to cover such a big canvas. But it's absolutely, great to hear some of these perspectives, because I share, like you rightly said in the beginning, at least I'm sure, those things must have triggered quite a few things, either at a company level or at an individual level, or definitely at a policy level as well. Thank you so much from all of us, Sridhar.
Thank you, Professor, and I appreciate all the participants joining again on a Saturday evening. I'm happy that I could invest my 1 full hour to provide some thought provoking, even if it is for one person. I think my 1.5 hour investment is well done here. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sridhar. Thanks.